take it over for you because Kellan just ran out of the courthouse, and so we're just going to ask her a couple questions from here, if that's okay with you, because she can't hear you. But Kellan, just set the scene for us. You were in there for quite some time. What was it like inside the courtroom?
Well, Alex, we had to wait all day to even get into this courtroom. They allowed a group of us in at about 9 a.m. and then we weren't allowed to have cell phones, no electronic devices, so then it was just kind of a waiting game. Finally, at about 2:45 is when my group of reporters was ushered in. About 40 reporters total were allowed to come in, plus about 10 members of the public. And when I got into the courtroom, the former president was already seated. He was wearing a blue suit. I sat directly behind him, behind about 2 rows of Secret Service detail. And the courtroom was full, but I'd say there was maybe about 60 people total in there. I did see Jack Smith, the special prosecutor in this, sitting on the other side in the audience, not in the prosecution benches. The president did not speak at all the entire time. When the plea was entered, it was his attorney, Don Blanche, who entered that plea, and he said, of course, we plead not guilty, sort of not in a joking way, but there was no question that it was going to be anything else. Now, there was some discussion back and forth that made this arraignment take a little bit longer than we thought it was going to. We thought it was just going to be the not guilty, the reading of the bond, and then we would be out of there. But there was some disagreement between the government and the defense over one of the special conditions of the bond for the former president, and that is who he is allowed to talk to about the facts of the case without going through counsel. They sort of went back and forth on producing a list of potential witnesses in the case. What was ultimately decided by the judge is that the government, the prosecutors, would produce this list that would then, be potential witnesses that the former president is not allowed to speak to about the facts of the case. But there was a lot of back and forth about that.
Did they have somebody specific that they really wanted to be able to talk to that they mentioned?
They didn't mention anyone specifically. Sort of the issues that were raised by president's lawyers were, we don't know who is going to be on this list, and it could potentially be people that the president interacts with quite regularly. They did mention that one of the potential witnesses is the president's, continues to be the president's legal counsel. So that was mentioned, not by name, but they, expressed some concern because originally there was discussion of him not being able to talk to these people in any way, not just about the facts of the case. But what was ultimately decided on was that the prosecution would produce a list then that would be people who the president is not, former president is prohibited from speaking to simply about the facts of the case without going through counsel. And if his legal counsel has a problem with that list, they can petition the judge for a review of it.
When I've been in the courtroom and he's been on the monitor, sometimes joining from Florida, he will roll his eyes. He will, make a lot of facial expressions. I know you were sitting behind him, but could you see what his demeanor was like in there?
So I couldn't see any of his facial expressions. I was sitting behind him. I sort of joked with you that it felt like that opening scene in Succession, kind of looking at the back of his head. But I could see that he sort of, he went back and forth from folding his arms. He did lean over and whisper quite a bit with his representative, his lawyer Blanche. He didn't really speak so much with any of his other legal counsel. And then at the end, when we were adjourned and we were waiting to be escorted out of the room, the former president, he did stand up and he did turn around and he sort of looked at us in the press and kind of assessed us, didn't say anything, just sort of gave a quick glance and then, turned and walked away. Didn't say anything, didn't make any sort of gestures or anything.
Well, as he looked in the gallery, you mentioned that the first 2 rows had Secret Service in them. Was there anybody else there on behalf of the former president?
I didn't see any of his family members or any of his sort of entourage that I would typically recognize. It seemed like it was a lot of just his Secret Service that was there with him in the courtroom. Now, there may have been other people that were waiting outside of the courtroom, but from who I could recognize, I did not see anybody, any members of his family or any of those people that we normally associate with him.
Did the judge say anything about his lawyers? We've had this legal representation go on and off, and new and old people jumping back on and off the ship. was it a hectic start to it? Did he make any comment about that?
Well, they did establish that the two lawyers who were with the former president today, they will be representing him permanently. In fact, one of those lawyers was actually given that special waiver that we've been talking about by Judge Kellan, who has been so controversial in this case already. So those two that we saw today are going to be representing him permanently in this case. There was a bit of a back and forth on the other defendant in this case, Mr. Nada. His lawyer today, his last name is Woodward, has not yet received that waiver. And so because of that, his arraignment actually had to be delayed by about 2 weeks. They were able to go through with the reading of the bond. His bond has the same conditions as the former president's. They both don't have a financial condition. They don't have to pay any fines. There's no travel restrictions. They don't have to give back their passports. There's no restriction on owning firearms. But there is that special condition about who they can talk to about the facts of the case. And so because of what we were talking about with that special waiver for that lawyer, Woodward, who is not barred in this specific Southern District, they're going to delay his arraignment where he enters that plea of guilty or not guilty by 2 weeks. When they do come back for that arraignment, though, the judge said that Mr. Nada does not have to appear in person at that arraignment.
It's kind of interesting to see how they're charged with some of the same crimes and how this might be a very different situation for both of them. CNN was reporting that Nada had his mugshot taken, even though the former president did not. Now you're seeing that his arraignment is postponed. Obviously, the former president was able to have his today. Did his lawyer say anything, or was there any representation of him in the courtroom at the same time?
Mr. Nada?
Yeah.
Yes, it was only Mr. Woodward that we saw in the court at the time. His was the only representation there, and he just said he was waiting for that waiver in order to continue to represent him permanently. And what I will say, you brought up the mugshots earlier. We did hear earlier in the day from one of the U.S. Marshals who was going through what the procedure would be for the booking for Mr. Trump, for the former president, and for Mr. Nada. And what he did say to us when we asked about the mugshot, we were told that it would be a photo of him that was uploaded, a previously taken photo, not a new mugshot. And we kind of asked, well, why? Like, why isn't he getting a mugshot? And what the U.S. Marshal told us was, we all know what he looks like. We've seen his face millions of times, and, we don't consider him, he's not considered a flight risk. It's not somebody that could just kind of sneak out of the country and we wouldn't know about it. And prosecutors today also said they don't consider him a flight risk. That's why there's none of those travel restrictions being placed on him.
That's an interesting justification for not having a mugshot. I've never heard that one. Dell has a question for you. What's going on, Dell?
Yeah, Alex, I know that you're going to relay my question, so don't tell her how impressed I am with the incredible detail that she has managed to describe everything that happened inside that courtroom, because I've recognized that she is not holding any notes. So I'm wondering whether or not she has an audiographic and photographic memory. But that said, Eric Trump, we know that he was with the former president. I'm curious, did she see any other family members of the former president, Ivanka, Melania, or any others with the former president as this arraignment took place?
Did you see any current or any family members? I know you mentioned that you didn't see any in the courtroom. Were there any of them, roaming around the halls as you were waiting to get in, or anything like that?
I did not see any family members. None of those faces that we're also familiar with. In fact, the most of the people that I was seeing were, U.S. Marshals, people who work for the courts. A lot of journalists. There were probably at least 100 of us waiting in this sort of holding room all day. But there were a handful of members of the public who were there as well. And I actually did talk to a few of these members. Some of them slept overnight in this line to get into the court. But what I was kind of surprised by is that, save for just one of them, the folks that I talked to who were there, they weren't these sort of flag-waving, extremely pro-Trump supportive. A couple of them were just sort of swept up by the history of what was happening today and said that they just kind of wanted to witness it and wanted to see, this history taking place, something that's never happened before, and witness it for themselves.
So were they saying they're not angry about the indictment, they just wanted to kind of see how this all unfolded?
One man that I talked to, and let me flip through my notes really quickly just to get a little bit more detail on him. He is actually a federal litigation attorney who lives in California, but he was out here in Florida traveling for a basketball camp for his daughter, which is about an hour away. And when he heard about what was going on, he said, I'm a federal litigation attorney. I want to know what's going on. He drove and decided to see this. He told me that he was a Trump supporter, that he did vote for President Trump in 2016, but that he doesn't support him anymore after the events of January 6th. And so he said he really just kind of wanted to witness this moment in history today, especially as someone who practices federal law himself. Just thought it was a fascinating thing to be a party to. But he said he got here about 10 o'clock last night and camped out overnight in order to get into the courtroom.
Wow. Trump is just right now, so you know, he's greeting some people here right now. Del, I'm going to send it back to you so you can cover what's going on down there.
Kellan and Alex, I thank both of you. We want to go right now to Ryan Wiggins, who is the Chief of Staff of the Lincoln Project. As we see the former president right now,